Welcome to the Active Travel Adventures podcast. I'm your host, Kit Parks. Huge milestone today. We are celebrating episode 100, and I would not be here without you and your support and encouragement. So thank you. I thought to celebrate, it would be fun to look back on these last 4 years and reflect. I checked the stats to see which were your favorite episodes and looked over the adventures and then chose my own favorite adventures that I personally went on. I also made a list of the top 5 adventures where I interviewed others about their experiences that I want to go on but I haven't yet. The top 5 in popularity of just my general adventure travel topics, not destination specific shows, but things that we learn about different things like how to choose a tour company. And then finally, I list my top 5 adventures that I haven't yet covered and I haven't been to, and so you can bet that we're going to be hearing about them sometime in an upcoming show. I hope today's episode feeds your soul, builds up your wanderlust, and gives you some great ideas for the future. When I first picked up the mic in the fall of 2017, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing or what I was getting myself into. And if you listen back to my earliest episodes, you'll laugh at how I hardly took a breath, and those few times that I did, I actually edited that space even more to save you a little bit of time. That is until my friend Marty wrote me and said, "Kit, those pauses allow us to process and digest the information. Give us that time." So thanks to Marty, I now count to a quick 5 count between questions or any major change of thoughts. And I think of Marty every time I edit. One of my favorite things about the show is how I've gotten to meet so many incredible people, none of whom I would have met if it weren't for this podcast. I have made friends from all over the country and actually all over the world via introductions, when I went seeking trying to find somebody to tell us about a particular adventure that I wanted to cover, or if you wrote in to suggest one I hadn't even considered. And on my road trip in Sophie this last year, and Sophie is my converted Sprinter cargo camper van, I met dozens of you for the first time, and it was like meeting an old friend. I love how we're already almost pre-selected to like each other, and by virtue of us loving the outdoors, adventure, and using our bodies to see the world, I already know that you're going to be my people. And so I just absolutely love it. So thanks for being a part of the show. Keep those emails coming and the conversation going. You can always reach me at kit@activetraveladventures.com. So with that, let's get started. So the first category that we're going to go over today is the most popular adventures that I've covered on the show, and this is based on total downloads. Drum roll, please. The number 1 most popular show I've ever done is on Banff National Park in Canada, and this is by a long shot consistently month after month after month. And by the way, I'll put links to all these shows that we're talking about today in the show notes, so whatever platform you're listening to the podcast, just scroll down, whether it's on your phone or on the website, and you will see all the different links mentioned. So if you miss these episodes, go ahead and download them, and you'll find out why they are so popular. So number 1 is Banff National Park. And in Banff, this is a 4-season, I guess it's kind of a resort town. I have not been there. This is pretty high on my list to go see. And I had interviewed this guy, John, I met while I was in New Zealand backpacking. And so John's job, not only did he live there, he was part of the tourism industry there. So he had tons and tons of great suggestions for us of all the different fun things that you can do there. And Banff has got it all. From beauty to activities. You don't even need a car there, so it's great to just fly in. You can walk to everything. So if you've not listened to the Banff episode, make sure that you do and find out why that is consistently the number 1 show on the Active Travel Adventures podcast. The second most popular is the El Camino de Santiago, a bucket list trip of a lifetime for many of us. In fact, I was supposed to go do the Portuguese way last year until COVID interfered. And I guess it's probably going to be like another couple years before I get a chance to do that. So the El Camino de Santiago, there's actually 5 different trails, or actually many trails, 5 main trails that get into Santiago. It's a pilgrimage trail that doesn't always have the religious undertones that it once had. I've covered the main French way of the Camino with Janet Hanpeter, so I'll put a link to that. And then also I had Follow the Camino, one of my affiliate tour companies. I had Umberto come on and tell us a little bit more about some of the things we need to look at, as well as ways that you can bike the Camino. And I have some upcoming recorded in the can of some of the more obscure Caminos that get into Santiago. So if you don't want it as crowded of a Camino, you'll learn about those later in the year as those shows get released. So the El Camino de Santiago, big hit at number 2. The third most popular is my own adventure to New Zealand, which still remains my number 1 favorite trip of all time. I love New Zealand. I love the Kiwi people. I love the landscape. There's just so many fun things to do, and it is just a gorgeous, outdoorsy, fun country. And this was actually a 3-part episode. And if I add up all 3, that would be the most popular because New Zealand is a top-ranking, month by month, a top-ranking episode. The 4th most popular is one that's high on my list to do personally, and that is cycling Vietnam and Cambodia. This is a great way to see a country, and I'm excited, and hopefully it's still going to go off my very first cycling holiday where you get to see a country up close and personal, but you get to see a lot more of it because you're on a bike. So that Vietnamese Cambodia is a wonderful way to see a very exotic culture, and then in fact when you're in Cambodia, you get to go to Angkor Wat on your bikes. You're away from all the buses and throngs of tourists and get to see Angkor Wat in a very unique way and away from all those people. So that's definitely on my list to do next chance I get to Southeast Asia. And it remains number 4th most popular trip of the show. And the 5th most popular is the Italian lakes. You like things a little classier, really, really beautiful. This is where Mull and George Clooney have a house. I think Madonna's got a house there. Beautiful, beautiful lakes, crystal clear, beautiful mountains, great food. There's a reason it's the 5th most popular episode. And before I go on to the next category, the least listened to, I want to mention the least listened to podcasts, and they tend to be my African adventures. And I want to tell you that I've been to Africa 3 times now. I've been to Morocco, Tanzania, and Egypt. And I know people tend to do Africa later in their adventure as they get more comfortable because it seems just so foreign to a lot of us. There's a lot of poverty. There's a lot of underdevelopedness there, shall we say, that makes people uncomfortable. But if you go with a reliable tour company, and I've got recommendations, of course, Africa is really high up of my trips. And Tanzania and my safari in particular was amazing. I mean, there's the wildlife is so much, and how do I put it? It's just everywhere. You're like, I can't believe there's so many animals, and they're all just mingling together, and it's just an incredible experience. On the 5th day of my safari, I'd finally said, okay, I guess I've seen enough lions and giraffes and hyenas, and it's just an incredible trip of a lifetime. So please reconsider Africa. And if you're not quite sure if Africa is your cup of tea, I encourage you to listen to my Tanzania episode, and you'll see why Africa maybe should be put back on your list, or at least added to your list as a consideration, because I truly think you might be missing out on one of the greatest experiences I've ever seen, particularly if you like animals. So after we conclude the most popular and my least populars, let's do the top 5 adventures that I covered on the show that I personally covered. So I just pretty much interviewed myself or talked about my own experiences of my adventure. And number 1 for me, as I mentioned before, was my New Zealand trip with Active Adventures. I absolutely loved it. I loved it so much that when Manny, Bill, and Carol were going to go to the North Island, I said, right after the tour that I was on, I was like, well, I want to go. So I canceled my self-touring plans and ended up going on the tour with them and had a ball. That's when I rafted down a 21-foot waterfall. We went in a glowworm cave under the ground, maybe I think it was like 60 meters underground. We jumped off a cliff. We went mountain biking in that forest. I think it's got like 30 letters, the Waha, Rira, Wara, something like that forest. It was just a magical, surreal trip that I cannot more highly recommend. And then my number 2, like I just mentioned about Africa, was my Tanzania Safari. Now, that's not as adventuresome because you're in the Jeep most of the time. I intend to rectify that. My next trip to Africa, I want to do the Botswana with active where you're actually paddling and hiking. And then I also want to do the gorilla trekking that we covered on the show earlier in either Uganda or Rwanda. I haven't figured out which one I want to do there yet. But if you're not comfortable going into the bush on an active adventure, consider the safari. This Tanzania trip, going on safari, put that on the list. It was amazing. My third most favorite adventures that I have personally done that I covered on the show is my trip to Bhutan. Bhutan to me remains the most exotic country I've ever been to. It is different from any other place I've been. And I've been to, I think, 5 continents. I think I'm somewhere around 30 countries, probably at least half of which are in underdeveloped countries. So it's a pretty broad spectrum. But Bhutan is unique. They are isolated in the Himalayas, and unlike most every country in the world, they've never been conquered because those mountains are so foreboding. Nobody felt like crossing the mountains to infiltrate them. So they were isolated from the rest of the world until the last few decades. And only in the last, I think since the late 70s or 80s, have even been allowing tourists in. And they limit that very, very much. So you get to see a culture as it pretty much existed centuries ago. And highly recommend the Bhutan trip. And so I recommend listening to that. That was a 2-parter episode too. I did one on my adventure. I hiked the Druk trek, which is a 4-day trek. And then I also did an episode simply on the culture. But Bhutan, put that on the bucket list. Amazing country. My 4th most favorite trip, and I had problems picking which one of the two, but I decided to go with the first one, the West Highland Way. As much as I love my Cotswold walking holiday, I love them both, probably equally. However, I just discovered by accident walking holidays, particularly in Europe. It's just so easy to do, where every day I walk from one medieval village to the next through these country lanes. These are the old trade routes, and so these are paths that have been walked for centuries, and they're not necessarily difficult, but you're going pretty much a day's walk from village to village through gorgeous scenery, and you get to really get a sense of a country, and you get to actually meet the people. I was meeting the people walking their dogs, and I'd met people from around the world. In fact, I met one of my good friends, Simon, on the West Highland Way, and that was 4 or 5 years ago. We remain good friends to this day. So the walking holidays really opened my eyes to a new way to travel, and so I put the West Highland Way as my number 4 top favorite adventure that I have done myself. And number 5, also an eye-opener for me, was my trip to Nicaragua. While Nicaragua is not necessarily safe to go to right now, that was my first time I realized, oh, you could do these adventures and hiking, all that, in other countries. It doesn't just have to be in your own country. And if it was my friend John, who was always doing these amazing adventures each year, I thought only special people could do this, or really skilled people. And so on my annual Christmas email to just check in and see how he's doing, I said, so where are you going next year, John? And he's like, I'm going to Nicaragua. Why don't you come? I was like, why don't I go? And so I did. And that trip changed my life. In fact, I would probably credit that trip with this podcast because I knew I had wanted to start a travel podcast. I had gotten into hiking and backpacking. And then it was that trip where the light bulb went off. I said, if I didn't know that you could do this kind of thing, I'll bet you there's other people out there that don't know that you can do these things. And I'm going to go find out the things we can do, and I'm going to do a show about it. So the Nicaragua trip not only opened my eyes to adventure travel in general, it is the seed that planted this podcast. So my top 5 adventures that I personally did: New Zealand, Tanzania Safari, Bhutan, the West Highland Way and walking holidays in general, and Nicaragua. Now let's move on to the top 5 adventures that I've covered, but still remain on my bucket list because I haven't been there yet. And so I encourage you to listen to these shows as well because there's a reason they're on my top 5 list. So number 1 is Patagonia. Everyone I've known that's ever gone to Patagonia cannot stop gushing about how beautiful it is, how amazing the hiking is. And so I've actually booked a trip to Patagonia next fall of 2022. In fact, you're welcome to join me on that. I think there's still a few spaces left. I'll put a link in the show notes to that. I'll be doing Active Adventures Patagonia trip In fact, I signed up for 4 of their Central and South America trips. I plan to head to Costa Rica for the trip that I'm not leading but organizing in April of next year. And then I plan on just hanging out and moving my way southward down to Patagonia throughout the rest of 2022. So I encourage you to join me on any of those trips. Again, I'll put links in the show notes to that. But Patagonia is my number one place that I have not yet been but want to go to. But I hopefully will be able to say that I have hiked the W Trek and Patagonia next year. Number 2, also on that same big adventure I'm going on, is Machu Picchu. One of the most popular episodes on this program is climbing Machu Picchu. And I want to do the Inca Trail, so you got to make sure you reserve early enough so that you can get one of the permits for that. And there's also the Laurus Trail that's not quite as hard. And so you hike up, but then you get transport down. And the beauty of hiking to Machu Picchu, number 1, you're working for the reward of getting up there. But also that you get up early in the morning, so you're at the sun gate at dawn to see the sun coming through just as the Incas had planned it and placed it. And you get to see the magic before all the tourists get there. So I'm super excited about doing that next year as well. Third on my list of places I have covered but haven't yet been is India. Where some people feel intimidated about Africa, I get a little intimidated about India. I really want to go. I got to worry about the air pollution in some of the cities because I got some lung issues there. And I'm also a little bit scared to go by myself. So while I'm on this trip, I'm hoping to go on this fall. Once I finish those, if the world seems like it's moving up and the COVID's doing okay, I'd love to find somebody to go to India with and go explore. It's an amazing country that I hear is a country you either love or hate, depending on your predilections, that it's an assault of the senses, that it's the noise, the smell, the crowds, the everything. It's mind-boggling, and I want to see it. I want to see it, hear it, taste it, touch it for myself. And so hopefully I will get to India in the next year or 2. But like I said, it's the one I'm a little bit twitchy on. It's outside my comfort zone to travel by myself, where I'm pretty comfortable now going just about anywhere. I do want to go with somebody there. So if anybody's looking, I'm hoping to go maybe sometime early winter this year. Fourth up on the places that I've covered but not yet been to is Nepal. Again, this is a place that the people that I know that have gone there keep going back. And these are big travelers. And when it's so expensive and time consuming to get to some of these more exotic places, it's got to be something special that people keep going again and again and again. And the people I know that go to Nepal, they don't just go once. They keep going back. So I want to go and find out what the hullabaloo is about. And I would feel comfortable going to Kathmandu by myself. So I might just do that if I don't make it to India. And the 5th of the top 5 adventures I've covered but not yet been is the El Camino. Like I said, I was supposed to do the Portuguese Way last year. That didn't happen. This year, just things didn't happen. I've been in the camper van. Next year is booked with Central and South America. So I think my next opportunity will be in 2023. And I do look forward to doing that. I do want to do the Portuguese Way. And I might do the Fisherman's Walk, which is another episode we covered on here. As I love Portugal, and I would like to spend more time there. And I think that's a great way to do both. So the top 5 that I've covered but not yet been: Patagonia, Machu Picchu, India, Nepal, and the El Camino. Now let's look at the 5 most popular non-destination shows we covered on the Active Travel Adventures podcast. First up, bucket list travel. When I first got Chase on the line and found out how young he was, I was like, oh, what kind of episode is this? In fact, the emails I got from you and the response was hysterical because you thought the same thing. I was like, how can this young man have so much to say? But I tell you what, this was a really good episode. So if you haven't listened to Chase's interview about bucket list travel and the things this young man has accomplished and how important it is to have a bucket list, I highly recommend this show. So that's the bucket list travel. It's the number 1 most popular non-destination show we've done on the podcast. Second up is solo travel. A lot of us are finding ourselves either solo by choice or by circumstance, or our significant other doesn't want to travel with us. And so Learning safe ways and fun ways to travel solo is the focus of that episode. That remains the number 2 most popular of our non-destination shows. Third up is how to choose a tour company. And actually, I did this episode after I made a big boo-boo with the tour company I chose to go to Morocco with. As much as I love the country, it was not my favorite trip because we spent so much time in the van. And so I came back home. I said, I'm not going to repeat that expensive mistake again. And so I did research and compiled what I learned into this show. So if you want to make sure that you choose the right tour company for what you want to get out of a trip, that's the episode for you. And then when you make your plans for adventure travel, then it's very important that you listen to the 4th most popular non-destination show, and that is how to train for adventure travel. It's super important that your body and mind are conditioned for whatever it is that you expect to do. And it's not fair to others if you're in a group if you can't keep up. Plus, it's no fun being exhausted at the end of the day. So I encourage you to train and train properly for your adventure. And this episode kind of gives you some background on how to do it. If you're ready to take the next step and you need some help, I do have an affiliate that I'll put a link in the show notes. Check it out. You can save an extra 10%, and at the same time, you'll be helping to support the program, which I thank you for. And last up, of the most popular non-destination shows we've done is the Adventure Travel Planning Guide. This is kind of an all-encompassing show to kind of puts all these moving plate parts together for you. So I'll put a link to all of these as well as all the shows that we talked about in the show notes today. Just scroll down on whatever application you're listening to the show on, and you'll find them there. The last group I want to cover are the top 5 places I've neither covered on the show nor been. You can be pretty sure that these will be on an upcoming episode. So if you've got some suggestions for these, please reach out to me. I'd love to hear about them. Number 1, I've never been to Greece. I want to go to Greece. I want to go to Greece. I want to go to Greece. I know they got some wildfires in some areas today, so I don't know if I'll go on this current trip that's planning, but every photo, movie I see of Greece, I just like, I want to eat there. I want to see it. I want to watch a sunset. I want to go on a boat and just float around and look at the islands. So Greece is number 1 of the top 5 places I would to cover on the show. The second one is surprising, and people are often surprised I haven't been, and for some reason I still haven't covered on the show either, and that's Ireland. And I think it's because I was supposed to go a couple years ago on a biking trip. That fell through. And then my sister and I have been talking about doing a biking or a walking holiday. We haven't been able to coordinate that yet. And then there's other times I wanted to go. Sherry Ott with Ottsworld, travel blogger Ottsworld, she runs a trip to Ireland that's amazing that I want to go on, but I'm always busy when she's got it planned, and that's when I'd like to go on. But sometime in the next couple of years, I'm going to get my little butt over to Ireland and see this beautiful, beautiful green country. The Irish people I know are just so much fun, and I love the scenery. I want to see the rugged coastline. I want to have a pint of beer. I want to sing in a pub, and I want to go to Ireland. So you can be sure we will be covering Ireland sometime in the next year or so on the show. Also super high on my list at number 3 of countries I've not covered and I want to get to and explore, and that is Colombia. Medellin, I want to go there. I want to taste the food. I want to experience the people. I want to see the beautiful buildings. I want to hike the mountains. I also think I need to go there sooner rather than later. I keep hearing things about FARC again. So I want that right now, things are pretty calm. They're good. Everything's under control. But sometimes situations in some of these countries can be volatile. So in any of these countries that are developing or have some political instability, it's always a good idea to keep an eye on the State Department of Travel website so you know what's going on. Keep an alert on that. But I will probably go to Colombia next year unless something dramatically horrible happens. I expect that I will be there, and I will be covering that as my own adventure that I cover on the show. Can't wait to see Colombia. One great place that I have not covered nor been is Indonesia. And I actually have a show on Indonesia that will be coming out this fall. It's been in the can for ages now, but me doing the Sophie Diaries kind of threw everything off of whack because I wasn't covering 2 interview shows each month. I was doing the Sophie Diaries. So while this has been in the can for quite some time, it actually won't be released until sometime this fall. But this was it was an all-girls trip. And it was a photography and just a relaxing girls' adventure trip. So I think that'll be a lot of fun. I look forward to sharing that with you. And last, it's another country you don't hear a lot of people going to, but the hikers that I know that have been there loved it, and that's Poland. I want to go see those mountains. I want to go see the history, and I want to go see Poland before it becomes too touristy. So sometime in the next couple of years, I'm going to get somebody on the show that's either been there and can tell us about it, or I'm going to get over there myself so I can tell you about it. So the top 5 places that have yet to be covered on the show that I haven't been or covered is Greece, Ireland, Colombia, Indonesia, and Poland. So my question for you is, what are the top 5 places I haven't covered that you'd like to hear me cover? Would you please write me at kit@activetraveladventures.com. You are the reason I'm doing this show, and I want to cover the places that you want to hear about. So you've heard about my bucket list items. I want to hear your bucket list items. And if you've got comments, suggestions, etc. about the show as we go forward for the next 100 episodes, I want to hear them. Please, I love hearing from you. My email again is kit@activetraveladventures.com. If you are interested in traveling with me, I've got the 4 Active Adventures tours that I have already booked for Central and South America for 2022. There'll be links in the show notes, or you can go to the website, and on the top bar, at the top navigation bar, there's the Travel With Me link. Click on that. Also, the Costa Rica trip, there's still a couple of spots available as of the time I'm recording this show, and that is filling up fast. So if you're interested in all, that is a long trip. It's going to take you about 3 weeks, but we are going to be hiking from one side of Costa Rica to the other, from the Caribbean to the Pacific. It's a 16-day hike, and then we've got some activities that you can add on if you want to have a bookend to look at the turtles and do some kayaking in the beginning, or just hang out at the beach and look at the animals on the Pacific side. So you can get information about that at the website as well, or just email me and I can send you the information. I know I'll be adding more tours to the Travel With Me page on the activetraveladventures.com website. So far, like I said, I've just booked the ones I'm doing with Active Adventures, but there's a lot of countries in Central and South America. I intend to go to most of them on this. I'll probably be gone, 7 months. So I'll be probably hitting most, if not all of them. And I expect I'll be doing at least 1 tour in each. So if you're interested in joining me, please make sure that you bookmark the Travel With Me link on the website, or just reach out to me and I can keep you posted as well. This has been an amazing ride over these last 4 years. In fact, it's almost exactly 4 years since I started the show. I thoroughly enjoy it. I really appreciate your support and you listening and sharing this with other people. It is very difficult with over 1 million podcasts out there to get the word out. And sometimes people know about this one, but they don't know about the companion podcast, the Adventure Travel Show podcast. Or conversely, I got an email from Nicholas the other day. I thought he was talking about Active Travel Adventures, but no, he was talking about the Adventure Travel Show. And I was puzzled why the schedule of the shows didn't line up with what. I was like, oh, there must be a problem with the app or something. Turns out, no, he was talking about the other show. And he'd never heard of the Active Travel Adventures podcast. So I really appreciate you helping to spread the word. So if you have not listened to the Adventure Travel Show podcast, that's the how-to. Those are where I go through the different skills and checklists and things to give you the tools that you need to have the confidence to do the adventures that I talk about on the show. I do a lot of research. I find the best sites on whatever the topic may be, and I try to consolidate that into an easy-to-absorb format. And then I have the downloads that go with all the shows, the travel planners that go with all of the adventures that we cover on the Active Travel Adventures podcast, but then all the how-to downloads that go with the Adventure Travel Show podcast. If you're interested in accessing any of those, you do need to get the monthly newsletter. I promise you it's only once a month. It comes out generally the first Thursday of the month, sometimes the second Thursday of the month. And in it, you'll have the links to all of the free downloads, links to whatever shows we covered in the previous month. I don't spam you. I don't sell your email list. The email just comes right into me. It's just a one-on-one way for us to communicate. So I do hope that you will do that. You can email me directly at kit@activetraveladventures.com, and I can put you on the list. You can go to the website, activetraveladventures.com, click on contact, newsletter. There's all different ways to reach out to me, and I do encourage you to do that. I'm thrilled that we made it to 100 episodes, considering like 90 some odd % of podcasts don't make it to 8. I want to pat myself on the back a little bit that despite whatever goes on in my life, I still manage on, it's going to be, I think, forever, the first Thursday and the third Thursday. That way you know exactly when it's going to come out, because sometimes there's 3 Thursdays in a month, and that kind of throws things off. So going forward, I'm going to continue with the schedule we started this year with the first and the third Thursday. So there will be 24 episodes a year. And I hope that you have subscribed or followed or whatever your app asks you to do to make sure you don't miss an episode. Thank you again for listening. Thank you for support. I appreciate you, and I look forward to chatting with you in the next episode. Until next time, this is Kit Parks. Adventure on.